In recent years, more and more meat replacements have been stocking the shelves of supermarkets, in part due to an increase in vegetarianism, and also due to claims that reducing meat intake has both health and environmental benefits. Now, we're not going to touch much on the environmental side of this argument in this video, as that likely deserves its own video. But obviously, farm animals don't drill for oil, and so don't extract sources of carbon from miles underground. And so they can't contribute directly to emitting CO2 from fossil fuels into the atmosphere. And so any environmental issues are more due to modern farming practices and how their food is produced, rather than the animals themselves. With human food being grown in a similar way to animal food, with industrial agriculture using industrial fertilizers, herbicides, insecticides, and fungicides, all of which harm soil health and the environment. And so if growing plants to feed animals is bad for the environment, then growing plants to feed humans is also bad for the environment. And feeding plants directly to humans is just a bit more efficient, as it cuts out the middleman. Now for the rest of the video, I want to focus on what the health effects from substituting meat for these meat replacements or fake meat might be. Unfortunately, there seems to be a lack of any high quality studies that look at the health effects from substituting meat for fake meat. And so I want to examine some of the health claims for replacing meat and compare the ingredients and nutritional compositions of these meat replacements to actual meat. There are two main claimed health benefits. The first is that replacing meat with fake meat will reduce saturated fat intake, therefore reducing cardiovascular disease. The second is that replacing red and processed meat with fake meat will reduce the incidence of colon cancer. Now, we've looked at the evidence for both of these on the channel previously. The claims that saturated fat clogs your arteries is based on poor quality observational studies that showed a correlation between saturated fat consumption and heart disease in some countries. However, this was just a correlation and not a causation. And the best evidence we have, which is from higher quality randomized controlled trials, which can actually show a causation, has found that saturated fat consumption doesn't cause heart disease or increase the likelihood of death at all. But interestingly, they found that replacing saturated fat with omega-6 polyunsaturated fat from vegetable oils might increase your likelihood of death over longer time periods. Similarly, the claims for red meat and cancer are also based on data from observational studies, with some observational studies finding a weak correlation between red meat and processed meat intake and colon cancer. However, in those studies that found a correlation, those who consumed more red meat were also older, had more body fat, exercised less, and smoked and drank more, all of which are more convincing reasons for the increased cancer rate than meat consumption. There has also been no evidence to support red meat causing cancer from randomized controlled trials, and there is no increase in cancer risk with increasing red meat intake, and no established mechanism. For more details debunking both of these health claims, then check out my videos where I cover these topics. And so we can see that the two main health claims for replacing meat with fake meat are flawed and based on bad science. And so what are these fake meat replacements actually made of? And are they nutritionally similar to the actual meat they're trying to replace? And are they healthy, or are we just being sold more processed and highly profitable junk food? The main types include fake meats from the proteins of fungi, which make up corn, and proteins from peas or beans like retextured soy protein products, as well as things like vegetable burgers. There is also lab-grown meat that is essentially some cancer cells grown in a vat that are then combined with some other ingredients to make something more similar to a food, and not just some cancer cells floating in a growth medium. But I've yet to ever see lab-grown meat in a shop, so we'll ignore that one for now. Let's look at some examples of meat substitutes. We'll start by looking at fungus protein or mycoprotein-based substitutes. The mycoprotein is grown in a vat similar to beer production, and grows in long, fibrous, root-like structures. The most common mycoprotein products are by the brand Quorn. If we look at Quorn mints, which is one of their products with the least ingredients, with only 7 ingredients, then it's mostly made up of mycoprotein with some other ingredients like egg whites and some compounds to improve the appearance, texture, and flavour. So how does it compare to the beef mince it's supposed to replace? Comparing 100 grams of Quorn mince to 100 grams of 16% fat beef mince, we can see that beef mince contains a significantly higher amount of protein. The beef mince also has a significantly better composition of vitamins, with the fake mince lacking in many vitamins like choline and B12, with both having a decent but different mineral composition, with Quorn particularly lacking in both iron and iodine. And so the Quorn mince is much worse than actual beef mince in terms of the protein content and some of the micronutrients. But as we'll see, it's likely one of the better and less processed of these fake meats. And because it isn't derived from plants, it doesn't contain some of the anti-nutrient compounds found in some plant foods, like phytic acid, that reduces mineral absorption of essential minerals like iron, zinc, calcium, and manganese. And it doesn't have any refined carbohydrates and oils added. But it does contain a lot of fiber and some mold toxins, which might not be tolerated well by some. And according to one study, mycoprotein products might be a good source of zinc, but are a poor source of iron. And how digestible the fungal cell walls are and how bioavailable the nutrients are has not actually been studied yet. So it's not clear how bioavailable the nutrients from mycoprotein actually are. Many meat substitutes are also a lot more processed than the mince, with Quorn's southern fried bites being a fake chicken nugget that contains a lot more ingredients, including refined carbohydrates from grains and sugar, and refined seed oils and a lot less mycoprotein. We'll touch on why refined carbohydrates and oils are problematic later. And so mycoprotein itself certainly isn't the worst thing ever, but it is certainly inferior to real meat, especially when it's part of highly processed junk foods like fake chicken nuggets. Let's now look at some of the fake meats made from legume protein, that is the protein from peas and beans, for which the most common one is retextured soy protein. Retextured soy protein is actually a waste product of soybean oil production, which it turns out is a lot more profitable if you form it into meat substitutes and sell it as human food, rather than using it as livestock feed. One popular fake meat made from retextured soy protein are Linda McCartney vegetarian sausages, which are just over half soy protein with at least 19 other ingredients, with one of the main ingredients being refined seed oils, along with grains and various compounds to improve the texture, flavour and appearance, including some powdered iron oxide, which is rust, to give it a reddish-brown colour. And so these are a very processed food. But how does it compare nutritionally to an actual sausage? While looking at the macronutrients, it has significantly less protein and a relatively large amount of polyunsaturated fat from refined seed oils. However, I couldn't find the exact micronutrients for these sausages, so we'll assume that most of the micronutrients come from the textured soy protein and then compare to that. We can see that the pork sausage is superior for most vitamins, particularly B vitamins and choline, and is superior with some but not all minerals. However, when comparing the two, we also need to consider not just how much of each nutrient there is, but also how bioavailable the nutrients are, that is, how easily digested and absorbed they are. As soy is a bean, which is the seed of a plant, it is full of plant defense chemicals or anti-nutrients, including phytic acid, lectins, and digestive enzyme inhibitors. Phytic acid is able to strongly bind to some minerals, including zinc, iron, calcium, and manganese, preventing them from being absorbed in the gut, and is concentrated in the soy protein. And so even though soy protein may have significant amounts of these minerals, if they cannot be absorbed by the body, then they're essentially useless. With one study concluding that, to quote, "A main area of concern is the very low estimated iron and zinc bioavailability of meat substitutes, caused by the very high phytate content in products based on soy, pea, and wheat protein." The protein quality of meat replacements is also lower than real meat, which can be measured by something called the Digestible Indispensable Amino Acid Score, or DIA score. The DIA score tells us that plant sources of protein are worse than animal sources of protein in terms of their amino acid composition and how easily digested and absorbed they are. Soy protein also contains isoflavones that are phytoestrogens, that is, plant molecules that mimic the effect of the female sex hormone estrogen, which can interfere with hormone balance. And so fake meats made from legume protein, which is normally from soybeans, are nutritionally much worse than actual meat. They're inferior in their protein quality and amount, are lower in many key vitamins, and contain plant defense chemicals or anti-nutrients that reduce the ability to absorb minerals from the food, and are normally combined with other ingredients like refined carbohydrates and seed oils to make an ultra-processed food, as well as containing phytoestrogens that can interfere with hormone balance. The last type of meat replacement I want to look at is vegetable-based replacements, like veggie burgers. A typical veggie burger is essentially a processed mixture of vegetables, peas, beans, and grains, combined with other ingredients like refined seed oils. But with about a quarter of the protein content of an actual beef burger, they aren't really a meat replacement at all, just an assortment of plant foods processed into a burger shape. And as such, they're low in protein, high in anti-nutrients like phytic acid, which will again greatly reduce absorption of iron, calcium, zinc, and manganese, and lack in nutrients like vitamin B12 and iodine, which are lacking in plant foods. Therefore, veggie burgers are nutritionally completely different to actual meat and aren't really a replacement for meat at all. Moreover, many of these meat substitutes are actually ultra-processed foods that are a lot more processed than many of the meats they're substituting for. And these ultra-processed foods can contain a lot of refined carbohydrates from grains and sugars, and refined vegetable or seed oils. Refined carbohydrates are linked with chronic diseases like obesity and diabetes, and low-carbohydrate diets have been shown to be the most effective diets for weight loss. Seeds like grains, beans, and peas are also high in plant defense chemicals and antinutrients like phytic acid, which inhibit your absorption of essential minerals like iron, zinc, calcium, and manganese. And vegetable or seed oils are very high in omega-6 polyunsaturated fats, for which I've covered the potential negative health impacts of before in my video on vegetable oils. But vegetable oils contain very high amounts of the omega-6 polyunsaturated fat, linoleic acid, which upsets the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio in the body, which is thought to cause inflammation and insulin and leptin resistance, leading to obesity and diabetes. Because linoleic acid is a polyunsaturated fat, it is also chemically unstable and can react with oxygen, leading to what is called lipid oxidation or peroxidation. And this oxidation generates toxic compounds like aldehydes that are thought to be a driver of many chronic diseases like obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's disease, cancer, age-related macular degeneration, and others. And I think it's clear that these fake meats are currently nutritionally inferior to the actual meat that they're trying to replace, with actual meat generally containing more of many vitamins and minerals and having them in forms that are more bioavailable so that they're more easily digested and absorbed. And the protein content of actual meat is significantly higher while also being of a higher quality. All the fake meats are also lacking some beneficial compounds that are found either exclusively or almost exclusively in animal products, like creatine, carnitine, carnosine, taurine, the marine and animal forms of omega-3 fats that are EPA and DHA, vitamin B12, and heme iron. And indeed, it's well known that those on vegetarian and vegan diets are more likely to have deficiencies in omega-3 fats, vitamin B12, vitamin D, calcium, zinc, iodine, iron, and protein. And these are not well addressed by these fake meats. Whole foods are also very complex with thousands of different compounds, and so there's likely many differences between real meat and fake meat that I haven't mentioned, and likely many that haven't even been discovered yet. For more content like this, check out the rest of my videos, and if you want to support the channel, you can do so via PayPal or Buy Me Coffee, which are linked in the description below.